Okay, hi, I'm Janelle.
I'm Katrina.
I'm Lana.
I'm Kristen.
I'm Laura. We are first year students in UNLV's Doctorate of Physical Therapy program, and we thought it would be a good idea to do a video series just explaining what it's like to get into PT school, what it's like in PT school, and just everything that goes along with it. So our first topic
Is how do you actually get into PT school? The requirements for PT school, according to the PTCast website, is you have to have a 4.0 above 3.5. It depends on the school. You have to take the GRE and have a score above 140. Again, it depends on the school.
Yeah.
And you have to have at least 100 observation hours at any PT clinic, inpatient, outpatient.
Doesn't that depend on the school too?
The max amount? I thought minimum.
I think
It
you can get all of
depends.
UNLV.
So this is going to be based off of UNLV's
Yeah.
specifications, because that's where we all go to. But again, it's just like the bare minimum. Always more for all those things are going to be better. So I guess the first thing we can talk about is GPA.
What I've heard is 3.5 and above is what you want. And if you're gonna be closer to 3.5, you want to bump up your stats with like a higher GRE.
Yeah.
For UNLV, how they break it down is they look at your overall GPA, they look at your prerequisite GPA, and then they look at your GRE score between your quantitative, verbal, and written. And it's in that order of importance. So you want your overall GPA to be the highest because it's worth the most points. So if you're on the borderline, I think it's definitely a good investment to retake classes, even though you're spending money to do that and you've already taken it. You want them to be as high as you possibly can be. So for example, if you have like a C in anatomy, you would want to take it again to get either a B or an A, because I think that's what most of us got on our
The
anatomy.
lowest, yeah. It's probably be a B.
And with UNLV, if you retake the class, it completely replaces that first
Yeah.
grade.
But for some schools, they might
Have an
assign-
average.
Yeah, they might see that you got a B and then an A.
Yeah. Just check with your school's actual website and the admission process on that for specifics. I guess the next thing is GRE. How did you guys tackle that? Like, when did you guys like take it?
Most of the application cycles for the schools that I wanted to apply to terminated in like October and November, and I signed up for the GRE to take September 16th. So, and then I did like a month crash course using Magoosh, which was a really good test prep site. It's similar format as the GRE, and it helps you prepare really well. Kaplan also offers free GRE like practice tests, so that's also a good resource. But I would recommend, looking back on it, to take it latest during the summer. That way, if you don't get a score that you are happy with, you're able to retake it again. And then you also have to think about, once you do get your scores, it takes a while to process for you to send them to the schools. So you definitely want to take it early.
Know your school codes before
Yes,
you take your
absolutely.
GRE. Because I
totally messed
didn't
that up
know.
too.
Because when you take your GRE, it's free to send them the scores to the school.
It's like a max of 4 schools.
Yeah,
It's
something like
a
that.
lot of schools.
I
that
didn't
you're
know
able
the
to-
codes. I only
I
knew
didn't
maybe
either.
like 2, and so I ended up having to pay for like a couple after taking it.
Some
So
schools
you want to
also
have an
don't
idea,
show up.
yeah, of what schools you want to go to. That way you can send the codes.
Yeah.
Some might have a specific code for the physical therapy department versus the whole
Yeah,
Graduate
sure.
college.
Yeah. So I think UNLV does.
Also eat before you take the test because it's a long one. I only had like a granola bar for the day. I'm not a good example. My stomach was like gurgling and probably annoying the other test takers. So make sure to eat.
Just don't think that you can take it like and not have practiced at all. And I kind of just put it to the wayside, and I did not do as well as I should have. I think I got the cutoff score. So if I could do it over again, I would have like tried a little bit more.
I took mine in September while I was still doing my fall semester, so that's why I think it's a good idea to take it maybe during the summer, because you're not worried about your other classes, and so you could dedicate your time to studying for that.
Did we both schedule it for spring break?
We did, and then we rescheduled, and that cost $50.
$50 to reschedule it, so be realistic
Yes.
of when you schedule it, because we scheduled it for spring break, and then we ended up having a bunch of other stuff to study for, and then we pushed it back to summer.
I did mine in the
Summer before application deadlines.
Yeah.
That's a good time to take it.
observation, which is going to be the majority of this video because I think it's the most important. I applied to PT school twice, and that was the reason why I didn't get in the first time. I was the summa cum laude at my college. I had the GRE that passed, and I still didn't get in the first year. That really, I feel like, shows you that it's very, very important for a lot of reasons. Like, I think too, you need the observation hours to make sure this is really what you want to do. Like, you have the more realistic experience with it. Like, oh, maybe you don't want to actually do that. How did you guys get your observation hours?
I started mine, so I applied for PT school in the fall of 2017. So I started mine in the spring of 2017, like in March. And so I was doing them on the weekends while I was doing spring semester, but then once summer hit, I was in there pretty much like every day, just trying to accumulate as many hours as I could.
So if you are a freshman and you're already thinking of physical therapy as a possible career choice for you, do observations as a freshman. That's what I did. I think I got like 40 hours of pediatric observation experience in my freshman year, and like that was cool for me. So I knew I wanted to keep doing PT.
Pediatrics though?
Not pediatric. Probably not. I felt like I was kind of cramming the rest of the hours, but a lot during the summer, and then I think like once a week during like fall semester or whatever during school.
I didn't realize I wanted to be a PT until like the summer after my junior year. I was a little bit later to the game, and I really hit like the bare minimum of that 100-hour mark every other day over a summer. Afterwards, once I had graduated, I got a job and then I was working, and that's how I built up a lot of hours.
I applied fall 2017 too, and then I started fall 2016. While I was doing my observations hours, it was usually during the weekends because I had class during the week. And while I was at one setting, I would already be applying to another setting because I knew I wanted to do the hospital, and that takes a long process. So while you're in one setting, make sure that you're like scoping out other areas that you want to observe in, and then inquire so that you can just do it like one after the other.
I started my hours spring of 2017, and then I was applying to PT school for the fall of 2017. I also want to build on Kristen's advice, because there are some hospitals that cap you at a certain amount of hours. Like there's a hospital I could only do 20 hours at. So at the same time, I was applying to different hospitals as well to get more hours in.
So what kind of places did you guys do your observation hours in, volunteering or otherwise?
Most schools require you to do different settings, which is nice, so you get a feel for everything. I did mine in a hospital setting. I did acute, I did rehab, I did a little bit of wound care, and then I did outpatient, adult and pediatrics, and then I also observed at a clinic out of state, which was cool to see.
I did an outpatient for general ortho, and that had a lot of neuro in it too. Outpatient pediatric, acute rehab, another outpatient general ortho, and then I started working as a tech in a general outpatient ortho setting.
So my first experience with observation hours was actually home health, because that's who was available to me at the time. I did do a few hours in another country, in the Philippines, because my aunt owns a
I'm like, I went out of state.
Use the connections that you have, take advantage of them. And then I volunteered at a teaching hospital for a few months. Once I had graduated college, I had all the time in the world, so I was spending 4 hours almost like every other day at the hospital until I could find a job as an outpatient clinic technician, and then I worked there for about 11 months.
I started off at outpatient orthopedics, and then I applied to be a volunteer at the hospital and said I wanted to help out the PTs, so they put me in the rehab. And then through the rehab, I met a pediatric PT who allowed me to shadow him in an outpatient setting, and I also did inpatient pediatrics.
I started with a rehab, and then I went to another hospital that did rehab, and then I did a skilled nursing facility for pediatrics. That was pretty cool. And then I also did one at a school, and then 2 outpatient ortho.
I don't know, I think there's kind of this conception that physical therapy is kind of just, people think outpatient ortho all the time, like, oh, I hurt my ankle, I hurt my knee, I'm gonna go to PT, but there's so many different settings. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't know about, like, hospital stuff.
I didn't until
I didn't know that was a thing.
Found it either.
And there's, like, women's health, there's wound care, there's so many different settings that you can observe in, and I think it's important to be able to have access into observing in all of those, just to see kind of like what you're interested in.
Yeah.
It's a broader field than you think it would be initially.
Physical
in general.
therapists do not just massage people.
No,
Right.
they do not. How did you guys find these locations to do your observation hours?
I work at an outpatient clinic, and so I knew therapists there, and I was able to branch over to the hospital side and observe over there. Looking back at it, I would want to do my observation hours a little bit differently and branch to different hospitals and different clinics. I wish I had more of an experience with that. It was kind of who I knew.
Same, who I knew. I was in the pre-physical therapy honor society with you guys during undergrad.
I wasn't either, it's okay.
Basically all of them were through that. So our advisor would like send out emails of clinics that were offering observation hours. That's even how I got my tech job. I applied like right after receiving an email about that, and then I even met one guy who worked as a tech at a clinic, and then we became friends, and he introduced me to his clinic, and then that's how I started doing observation hours there. So connections.
Yep.
Very important.
Yeah. So I started originally volunteering at a hospital because my aunt, she was a technician with the physical therapy group at that hospital. So I found out through her that they had a volunteering opportunity there when I had signed up originally at those hospitals. And I feel like in hospitals in general, they will kind of place you wherever, unless you specifically say, I would like to be in the physical therapy rehab part of the hospital. So don't be afraid to really like throw that in there. Otherwise, they were going to say like you were supposed to stay for around 6 weeks doing just generalized hospital things before they would let you specialize. But if you don't ask, you won't know, because I asked and I did not have to do the generalized 6-week thing. And then while I was volunteering, I was applying for jobs. Just like on Indeed.com, I would find any technician place and send in my resume and just wait for answers. I did do some shadowing at an outpatient neuro facility, and I had found that through Facebook, actually. Yeah, my mom, she was looking for places that I could volunteer, and an ad had popped up on Facebook for a clinic, and I just emailed that physical therapist and said, hey, I'm interested in physical therapy. Are you available for me to observe? And then from there you can talk about whether or not you would like to do it long term.
And you can
ask friends for help.
Yeah, and you can just walk into clinics, because at the clinic where I work, sometimes we'll have that. Like a parent will be like, oh, my kid's actually interested in physical therapy. Can they just come in and observe?
I just looked online. I observed at ATI Physical Therapy, and there are a lot of locations here in Las Vegas. So you just go onto their website, and then they have a button where it says volunteer, and then you just fill out the application and they'll get back to you. As far as the hospital setting, I had a friend that was going into OT school, and she did observation there and told me the whole process of how she became a volunteer. So I just followed the steps, and then when I got into the hospital, just talking to the PTs, they also work at different hospitals, at different clinics. Just ask them if you can observe them in those different settings, and most likely they'll say yes.
The only connection that I had was the founder of the Pre-Physical Therapy Honor Society that we were in, so I texted her and asked if I could observe her, and then she just had me contact the hospital. But otherwise, all the other sites, I just Googled all the PT sites I could find and pretty much call or email every single one of them. And that's how I met Lana.
I was just working.
I was in her clinic and I was like, hey, are you guys allowing observation? And she's like, no. Okay.
We do. You just have to go. There's like a process because we're part of like the hospital.
Are there any like tips you guys think you could give for how to make the most out of your observation hours? Like, obviously you need them as a requirement.
I like journaling, especially because remember how I observed in my freshman year, but I had a notebook and I would like write the date and what I learned and like what I experienced and how I felt. And that was so helpful years later when I applied because I read through the notebook and I remembered like what I learned during those observation hours. And then those were things I could still talk about like 4 years later during the interviews and stuff.
Ask questions while you're doing it because it's very like monotonous and tiring to just like stand there and just stare and be and engaging with the patients, because during observation hours you're not allowed to like put your hands on anybody or do anything clinical, but you are able to communicate with the patients and you're able to get their background and you're able to get how they're feeling, and those are the things you're going to remember. Like I remember some of the stories the patients were telling me and how they were feeling. Just being as engaged as you can, because it will be boring if you're just standing there, you know.
Yeah.
So
You get what you put into it. Like,
Yeah.
definitely don't be afraid to ask questions. I know for a lot of us in general, we're very hesitant to let people know that we don't know anything, and you kind of have to be aware that you don't know anything.
I thought gait was swallowing. She said she has abnormal gait. I'm like, oh, she can't swallow her food. And then I asked, like, what exactly is gait? And then the therapist explained it
Or
to me.
Google
so, you
it,
know,
too.
yeah, like,
Talk to the PTs. They're willing to teach you. You just have to let them know what you know and like what you want to learn more. So
Talk to the PTs, talk to the patients,
Talk
talk
to
to
the
the
patients.
patients.
Yeah, I think that's-
Absolutely.
yeah.
From all of the different observations that I have done, in my opinion, I feel like being a technician was 100% the absolute best way to get experience, because unlike when you're just observing, you actually have no choice but to talk to the patient and communicate with the patient, and you have to learn how to do that really quickly. You start to become more comfortable with patient interaction. When you get that work, you can kind of realize like how to overcome that, and then also whether or not that's something you actually even want to do, because I think that being a technician is the closest thing that you can get without having a DPT and a board certification, actually that physical therapist experience.
Yeah, I think my observation experiences were a lot more limited hands-on wise than my teching experience for sure. Like you'll learn so
definitely.
much by observing.
and I feel like just with our material that we learned in fall, I remember stuff that I saw during my observation hours.
Yeah.
Like, for example, we learned about orthostatic hypotension in one of our classes this fall, and I vividly remember someone experiencing that while I was doing my observation hours. So I'm able to piece those together and better remember the written information that we learned in class. It helps so much when you have, like, clinical experience.
How did you guys like deal with like essays and stuff? How many did you guys have to do? I didn't really.
So many.
I only applied to a couple of schools, so I only did like Toro and the personal statement for the national PT cast. So I like do like the least amount of writing possible, so I'm not the best to ask for that.
Yeah, I applied to 7 schools, so it was a lot. And then some of the schools had like a supplemental application with 3 more essays, and I was just like, oh my god. But I think the most struggle I had was I wrote too much because they had like character limits.
Yes.
Character.
When they say characters, it's literally like A is a character, B is a character. I
space.
thought it was words, so
Make sure you check on the website what the limit
yeah.
is.
So because I didn't want to write it in that given space already. I wanted to practice on like a Word doc, so I wrote it all out, and I was like, the perfect amount of words. Copy. Oh, it doesn't fit? Those characters. I struggled with writing the essays just because I feel like I'm not a fluent writer, so to speak. So I gave myself some time to do that, and I had my dad likes writing, so he looked it over and made sure it was coherent.
Ask for help.
Yeah.
Regardless of any situation, do not be afraid to ask for help.
I wish I asked for more advice, maybe from the physical therapists I knew. I wish I was comfortable enough to ask them to read over my essays.
Oh yeah.
I think I was embarrassed or something. I mean, I made it, but...
Do you guys have any tips on how to get rec letters?
The requirement is usually 1 PT,
Yeah.
and like you need a professor.
Office hours?
Get to know a professor. That way you have that resource to write your letter for you.
If you're going to ask for a letter of rec from a PT who you observed like in the past, like get their contact info, like good contact info. If you can text them, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then like keep in touch.
I was required to have a certain number of research credits in order to graduate. So I worked in a research lab. That's, I think, a really good way to have a relationship with a professor. I was doing like psychology, but because I had worked in that research lab for so long, I was able to get a rec that way. So when schools have those, they do usually have like a day where they have research where the professors will have their stuff out and be like, this is what we're researching. Take the time to actually look at that and find something that like could appeal to you, or at least a professor that you think would be interesting to work with, and then you can be able to get a rec letter that way. So make sure once you ask them, just check in every once in a while and just be like, hey, it's been about a month. I was just wondering if you had gotten around to it yet, or if you received the link, because that was the thing that was wrong with me.
Yeah, with the time too, on PT CAS, I think that you set the due date. So ask your letter of rec, like when is a good time for them to write the letter. Along with timing, make sure that the people that are writing your letter, they know you pretty well. You don't want like a general letter saying like, oh, you know, good student, good observer. You want them to go into detail about your personality, about
Specific things you might have done.
yeah, because along with the letter, they also have to fill out a survey. Your characteristics, they have to rate you. They have to rate you. So make sure that you have a good relationship with the PT or with the professor.
So just from personal experience, I didn't talk to any of my professors all throughout undergrad, so I was like, crap, which professor am I going to ask? So I took 2 classes with one of my professors, and I just asked to like meet with her one day, and I was just saying like, hey, I know that, you know, you don't really know too much about me, but I wanted to spend this time to talk to you about like who I am as a person, what my goals are for PT school, and I was wondering if it'd be okay if you can write a letter of recommendation for me, because I got 2 A's in those times in that class. She was more than willing to do that, and she like applauded me at the end, saying like, I really appreciate that you actually like went and did this, even though you didn't really talk to me that much. Like that was enough for me to write a really good letter about you. Shout out to Miss Fernandez.
The application process is stressful nonetheless. So I think the main takeaways from this video is to A, start early, B, make good connections, and C,
don't be afraid to ask questions. Take advantage of those observation hours. They're not just a requirement that you can check off when you're in school. It'll actually help you a lot.
And you'll realize if you actually care about the field or not.
Absolutely.
If you don't, that's fine.
Just one last tip. I remember doing this while I applied. I made an Excel sheet with all the schools that I was interested in, because you don't want to miss like the little requirements. Some schools have like really absurd requirements.
So thanks for watching the video.
and next time we're going to talk about interview day.
Yep. Woo! Okay, outro.
Bye.
Got this, bro.
Make sure to like this video to support our channel.